The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality. If you want an all Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, Black communities, then start that movement with that name. But that's not what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not an all-encompassing. So if you're talking about, if someone started a movement that said, cancer matters, and then someone comes in and said, why aren't you talking about HIV? It's not the same thing. We're talking about cancer. So the Black Lives Matter movement is about police brutality and injustice in that manner, not about what's happening in Black neighborhoods.
So the Black Lives Matter movement is about police brutality and injustice in that manner, not about what's happening in Black neighborhoods.
Not about what's happening in Black neighborhoods.
Did I hear that wrong? Or did Don Lemon just say on the Communist News Network last night that not all Black lives matter to Black Lives Matter? Guys, I use Virtual Shield VPN every single day on my phone and my laptop because anytime I'm online, I want to hide my identity, my activity, and my location. And you can try it for free for 30 days, plus get 30% off by using the link in the description.
Ultra-oppressed multimillionaire Donald Lemon, thank you, Jericho Green, interviewed Terry Crews last night on the top-shelf authoritative news source, the Counterfeit News Network. Here's how Lemon kicked that off.
All right, everybody, please listen to this segment because actor and activist Terry Crews facing backlash for tweeting, "We must ensure Black Lives Matter doesn't morph into Black Lives Better."
Let's just stop for a second and ponder these words. What's controversial about this? What well-reasoned individual would not agree with this? Where's the error? How can this be misconstrued?
Here's how he explained it. Are all white people bad? No. Are all Black people good? No. Knowing this reality, I stand on my decision to unite with good people, no matter the race, creed, or ideology. Given the number of threats against this decision, I also decide to die on this hill.
Doesn't it look like Terry Crews typed this out on his Twitter account in the spirit of Martin Luther King's admonition to judge a man not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character? Shouldn't we all unite with good people regardless of skin color?
Terry Crews joins me now. Terry, man, You stepped in it. You say that you're willing. You say you're willing to die on this hill. You've taken a lot of heat for this. Explain what you were thinking and why it's so important that you die on this hill.
Well, again, I wanted to bring up the fact that, there are some very, very, militant type forces in Black Lives Matter.
And by the way, these militant forces don't hide themselves. They don't mask their language. Here's Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors telling you in her own words that Marxist ideology pervades and controls her thinking.
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
It's that Marxism that controls the thoughts of the leadership of BLM and governs their actions. Then there's another leader of BLM in the greater New York area, Hawk Newsom, who says that if his people don't get what they want, they're going to burn this country to ashes.
We stand at a critical point in history. Give Black people their rights, or we will burn this country to ashes.
For some reason, and I wonder why, Donald Lemon and CNN don't let people know the true ideology and agenda of the BLM movement. Terry Crews is sitting there exposing that reality, and as we'll see, Donald Lemon will have none of it.
We will burn this country to ashes.
And what I was issuing was a warning. It's one of those things where I've been a part of different groups, I've been a part of different things, and you see how extremes can really get can go far and can go wild. And then when you issue a warning, and when a warning is seen as detrimental to the movement, how can you ever have checks and balances? In the 60s and 70s, airplanes went down all the time. And the reason they found out why they did was because the pilots could never be questioned. And when you have the leaders of the Black Lives Movement who are now talking about, if we don't get our demands, we're going to burn it down.
We will burn this country to ashes.
Other Black people who are talking about working with other whites and other races, they're being viewed as sellouts or called Uncle Toms. You start to understand that you are now, being controlled. You're not being treated as loved. You're actually being controlled. Someone wants to control the narrative. And I viewed it as a very, very dangerous self-righteousness that was developing that really viewed themselves as better. It was almost a supremacist move.
Let me jump
where
in, Terry.
they viewed that their Black lives mattered a lot more than mine.
Okay.
Terry Crews has just lifted the veil and touched a nerve that Mr. Lamone and CNN just can't tolerate. Crews just said the supremacy word and applied it to BLM, and that's a corporate media no-no.
So let me jump in here. There's a lot that you said. You think if Black Lives Matter is, you said you think it's an extreme movement? Because it's now part of the...
No, but this is the thing. It's a great mantra. It's a true mantra. Black lives do matter. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders, you're talking about the people who are responsible for putting these things together.
I got you. So let me, but
different things.
Terry, you realize that even during the civil rights movement that Dr. King was seen as extreme. That movement was seen as extreme. To people who don't want to make change, movements are seen as extreme. You can paint them easily as an extreme when they are not.
This has nothing to do with what Crews just said. Crews just mentioned extreme in the context of the leadership of BLM often expressing that if they don't get their demands met, they're going to burn the country to ashes.
We will burn this country to ashes.
These kinds of terrorist threats are not what Martin Luther King Jr. was all about, and Lamone knows this.
This is very true, but also when you're talking about MLK, you talk about Nelson Mandela, and even Malcolm X, they all realized that you had to have a non-racial component to these kind of movements.
In my opinion, Crews dropped the ball on this. Lamone should have been confronted about his misguided comparison with BLM to MLK. There is no comparison. One is a Marxist organization issuing terrorist threats, and the other was a civil rights movement aimed at equality for all Black lives, not just a select few.
Or there will be resentment. There will be get back. There will be, one of these people will tend to, listen, I don't want to move from one oppressor to the next. And one thing is really
who's the next oppressor? Who's the next oppressor?
Oh, when I describe this, when you look in the city of Chicago, there are 9 children who died by gun violence, by black on black gun violence, from June 20th all the way to today. And you're talking about even with the Atlanta child murders, there were 28 kids who died in 2 years. You're talking about a month, and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this.
What does
kind
that
of
have to
thing.
do with equality, though, Terry?
What does that have to do with equality, though, Terry?
You got to be kidding me, Don. Crews is making a point that these young Black lives matter too, and yet BLM is silent about those lives being snuffed out, while they prefer to march for the higher profile tragedies where white cops are involved in the incident. What Crews is saying is, why don't those Black lives that were lost due to black on black crime matter as much as the Black lives lost to white criminals?
I don't understand what that has to do with equality, because listen, there's crime. There are people in those communities those people aren't just being nonchalant about gun violence. I lived in Chicago. There are many people who are working in those communities to try to get rid of the gun violence. The gun culture in this country is prevalent.
And in regular CNN fashion, Don blames the inanimate object. He blames the gun. Gun violence is the euphemism that gives them justification to go after the guns of peaceful people who just want to protect themselves.
But I don't understand what that has to do with a movement that's for equality for black people. It's not mutually exclusive that if you care about equality for black people, that somehow you're going to stop random violence or, unfortunately, kids from being shot. It just seems like apples and oranges.
Well, it's like this, Don. The movement is called Black Lives Matter, not some Black Lives Matter. It's not called Black Lives Matter as long as it allows us to further our personal agenda. It's Black Lives Matter. Now, they all matter or they don't. Which one is it, Don? Do Black Lives matter or don't they?
You know, it's not that way. You know, this is the thing, Don. You know, black people need to hold other black people accountable. I said this the same thing. This is the Black America's version of the Me Too movement. If anything is going to change, we ourselves need to look at our own communities and look at each other and say, this thing cannot go down. And this is the thing, too. There are a lot of great, great people there who are held hostage, by people who literally are running these neighborhoods with violence and then claiming that Black Lives Matter. When you look at the parents of these little kids who are saying, hey, man, why aren't they speaking up for me, too?
All I can say to what Terry Crews just said right here is a frickin' man. And when he said, speaking of other black people, why aren't they speaking up for me too? The first thing I thought of was this lady whose business was destroyed by BLM protesters.
Problem that bothers me, you says Black Lives Matter. I've worked here part-time. Plus, I'm a part owner of this store. You said Black Lives Matter. Why don't you choke me? I'm black.
Tell him, sister.
Look what you did to my store.
Tell him, sister.
Look what you did to my store.
Tell him, sister. That's right, because I got their back. These are my dudes right here. Good
Look
men.
at the things you've done.
Good men.
Look.
The Black Lives Matter.
We've been here all night cleaning up. All night cleaning.
And you got black people standing right here with them. Black
Tell
people.
me
That's right.
Black Lives Matter.
Exactly.
You lied. You wanted to loot the store. You needed money. Get a job like I do. Stop stealing. This is the neighborhood. We're trying to build it up and you tearing it down.
Hey Don, save us the shallow excuses as you defend those who want to destroy all lives, including black lives, in the name of pushing an anti-liberty agenda.
And this is what I'm saying. When I look at this whole thing about, you know, it's about who is controlling the narrative. It's got to be all Black Lives Matter. And what's happened is that because I even challenged it, because I even questioned and warned people,
Terry,
I became like if I told you to wear a mask,
but Terry,
they want to kick you out.
Here's where Don cuts in and starts trying to dominate the conversation.
You're a high-profile person. You're writing things out there. You know you're going to get backlash. You know people are going to respond to what you're saying on Twitter. So I don't think you should be surprised by that. I have a skin as tough as an armadillo because of what I do, and I think maybe you should adapt that.
Think of the irony of this. Don Lemon is virtue signaling and telling Terry Crews that he needs to adopt a thicker skin.
But here's what I have to say. The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality.
Guys, that's not even true. What you just heard was fake news. This guy is sitting in front of CNN cameras every night, and he doesn't even know why BLM started. Let's read straight from the source. Under the heading, Her Story, on the blacklivesmatter.com website, they state, quote, in 2013, 3 radical black organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tomenti, created a black-centered political will and movement building project called Black Lives Matter. It was, listen up, Don, in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman. Zimmerman was not a cop. The genesis of BLM had nothing to do with police brutality, according to BLM. CNN, the most trusted name, in fake news. Please proceed from your springboard of fallacy, Don.
If you want an all Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, black communities, then start that movement with that name.
This is ironic because that's exactly why this movement supposedly started.
But that's not what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not an all-encompassing. So if you're talking about, if someone started a movement that said, cancer matters, and then someone comes in and said, why aren't you talking about HIV? It's not the same thing. We're talking about cancer.
And right there, Don Lemon dismantled and decimated his own argument. Sure, cancer is not AIDS, but Black Lives Matter is supposed to be about black lives. And that's what Cruz is saying. It'd be like someone saying, cancer matters, and someone else saying, yeah, but lung cancer matters too, or basal cell carcinoma matters also. And the guy who's saying cancer matters, of course, would respond, I know, that's what I mean. When I say cancer matters, I'm saying all cancer matters. But BLM has expressed and demonstrated, and Don Lemon is now making the argument that all Black Lives Matter is not what BLM is all about. Because if they were equally outraged whenever any injustice happened to any black person from any assailant, well, they can't have that because that can't be exploited to advance Marxist goals.
So the Black Lives Matter movement is about police brutality and injustice in that manner, not about what's happening in black neighborhoods.
Did you guys get that? Black Lives Matter is
not about what's happening in black neighborhoods.
There are people who are working on that issue, and if you want to start that issue, why don't you start it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
But when you look at the organization, police brutality is not the only thing they're talking about.
I know that. I agree, but that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about, Terry.
Wait, what? You know that, but that's not what the BLM movement is all about? The BLM movement is about what the BLM movement says they're about. They're about Marxism. They're about burning this country to ashes if they don't have their demands met. They're about reparations and many other things that CNN just won't cover because they prefer just the police brutality angle.
Black Lives Matter is about police brutality and about criminal justice. It's not about what happens in communities when it comes to crime, black on black crime. People who live near each other, black people, kill each other.
It is so good to hear Don make Terry's point for him. Did you guys get that? Straight from Don Lemon. Black Lives Matter is not about securing freedom for all black lives.
It's not about what happens in communities when it comes to crime, black on black crime.
Thanks, Don. We're going to document that for future use.
Same as whites. 80-some% of white people are killed by white people because of proximity.
Very true.
It's the same thing with black people.
But
that
again,
happens in every single neighborhood. But that doesn't, again, I'm not saying that's not important that those kids died, but it's a different movement.
Listen, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand. It is about police brutality. That should never be accepted. Yeah. I am not saying that that's not it, but there's more there. Okay. And when I look at, if they have more on their agenda, we need to ask them about what else is on that agenda.
Right. And that's the bottom line, guys. What else is on the BLM agenda? They've already let us know what's on that agenda, and they've demonstrated it.
Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
Give black people their rights, or we will burn this country to ashes.
Other than police brutality. And that's all I'm doing. Questioning, warning, watching. And if that bothers you, now that bothers me. Because if I can't warn you, we are equal. If we're equal, I should be able to say
Terry.
something as equal.
I gotta go. We'll see you. Terry, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Guys, this is definitely not funny. It's super serious. Leave your thoughts about this for the world, the Google Thought Police, and the Counterfeit News Network in the comments section below. If you get something out of this content and you want to support this channel, one of the best ways you can do that is by liking this video and sharing it with everybody you can, everywhere you can on social media. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification icon so that whenever I upload a video, you're one of the first to see it. If you want to further support the channel, the Patreon, PayPal, Bitcoin, and Subscribestar links are in the description below and in the pinned comment. Or you can grab one of these conversation-starting, hard-hitting designs that you can put on any shirt, hoodie, or mug from the shirt store, and that link is also in the description. Your purchase helps support more content on this channel. I will see you guys in the next heavily censored, shadow banned, and now 100% demonetized video.